fantasy world. Fast bikes, fast women, fast bikes, fast women. It's going to cost a fortune. Must win the lottery. Must win the lottery. Because for comparatively real-world money, you too can buy yourself a piece of genuine Italian two-wheeled motorcycling exotica. For example, a Ducati 748R could be yours for between 6.5 and 7.5 grand. Now that's just boring old CBR 600 money if you were to buy new. Of course, unlike a CBR 600, you really are going to stand out from the crowd on a Ducati 748R. You're going to stand out so much you'll look like you've rolled straight off Brands Hatch and onto the roads. It is gorgeous to look at and listen to. Whether or not you are a fan of Ducati in general or of sports bikes, you've got to admit this thing is delicious to look at. And the best thing is, it gets better the closer you look. That's when you start to realise just what a racing machine this is. The brakes, for instance, yes, they are incredible in terms of working, but just to look at them, they're gorgeous. Even the levers, the pistons, every switch, every button, every bit that you come into contact with on this bike has been designed with one purpose in mind, and that shows through when you look at it. If I had one of these, I don't know whether I'd want to ride it or just stick it in a glass-sided garage and stare at the thing. It really is that gorgeous. Underneath is a frame that comes more or less straight off the racetrack, and that sets the tone for the entire machine. And remember, there's only one top spec version over this one, the SPS, and that really is Looney Tunes money. So what you're getting here is pretty much the best of the best in everything. And remember, better still, if you walk out to the car park to collect your bike and it says this on it, you're already a hero before you've even turned a wheel. Of course, that beauty is much, much more than skin deep. Power is available all the time throughout the rev range. Whatever speed you're doing, however fast the engine is going, simply roll the throttle and it's an utterly flat power delivery. From just about 0 RPM, your arms stretch and the horizon comes closer. The brakes, Brembo of course, are astonishing. It's not a big bike to stop, but boy do they haul it to a halt in a hurry. The mirrors, I have to say, are utterly useless. This is definitely not a bike for filtering through traffic. But then there are other reasons than the mirrors for that. The riding position will put paid to any desire to be a dispatch rider on a 748. Your backside high in the air, your head down over the tank, your knees tucked up. There's no doubt you are on a racetrack machine. Once you've got used to it, you really can press on. The cornering speeds you can achieve are incredible. But somewhere at the back of your mind, you do need a little voice telling you this is going to be amazingly expensive to repair. Bodywork is not going to be cheap. Neither will insurance. Time, I think, for a reality check on a couple of points. Number one, I've said you can get a dream bike for real-world money, and you can. But it ain't going to be a cheap bike. Let's face it, there aren't many of these around, so you will be paying top dollar when you find one. For something like this W plate, which is immaculate with 5,000 miles up, you'll be paying the best part of 8 grand, and it ain't going to be cheap to service or repair either. Reality check number 2, that focused racing riding position. Incredibly uncomfortable, as I've said. Best way to describe it, have you ever seen those machines for getting fit? They give you a six-pack in 5 minutes, apparently, and you can still drink beer and eat chips. It's a wheel with a bar through the middle, and you roll it up and down on the floor. It's a bit like riding one of those at 100 miles an hour plus. Not comfy. It's a shame they don't make a two-seater. You could put your osteopath on the back, and it could sort you out as you went along. Let me put it this way. I've finished talking now, and I can't get off. I'm stuck. I need one of those things you use to get knights off horses. Help! Stuck on bike! Help!
Words in the bike world which conjure up certain images. One such word is Ducati. What does that make you think of? Could be a bright yellow 748 or a sexy red 916 or a 996. Big, shiny sports bikes. But Ducati make another machine, and the last thing you describe that as is a sports bike, and it certainly isn't shiny. In fact, it's black. It's completely black. Sort of almost matte black, really. It's got a kind of satin finish on it. And the only thing that is shiny about this are the wing mirrors. And they're actually useless as well. But more of them later. Ducati launched their first monster back in 1993. It was 900 cc's and it quickly earned itself a bit of a cult status with its aggressive looks and thumping V-twin power. This 600cc Monster Dark didn't arrive until 1998, and it was aimed at the rider who still wanted to be different, but perhaps didn't need quite as much power. It's more user-friendly, but it maintains the same aggressive image as its big brother. Yeah, it's definitely got a certain image about it, this bike. I think you either love it or you hate it, and really what you see is what you get, because you can see virtually everything. There's no fairing, there's no plastic work or anything at all to worry about. Instead, we've got this open trellis style frame here, typical of Ducati and often copied by other manufacturers. And you can see everything that's going on. All the electric pipes there, all the electric work, all the pipe work, it's all there clearly on view. Now, you might think that looks nice, it looks quite trendy, you might think, but I have to tell you that a few miles in bad weather and all of that is absolutely covered in muck. You've not got to go very far before you've got one heck of a cleaning job on your hands there. So, might not be a good bike for the bad weather. Down here, there's the heart of the beast. Big Ducati V-twin, 90-degree V-twin there, 90 degrees between the two cylinders. 583 cc's that, air-cooled, running a 5-speed gearbox as opposed to the more common 6-speed. And it develops just a touch over 50 brake horsepower, which you might not think is very impressive for a bike which is the best part 600 cc's, but it's a twin, remember, and it develops all its power very low down. They're very, very torquey twins, especially one like this, especially a big V-twin. Now let's just move a little bit further back to the seat in particular. I want to just show you this under here. Pop the key in there, quick turn, the seat comes off nice and easy like that. There it is, one piece dual seat, dual seat, not much of a pillion pad, but anyway, there you go. Not a lot to talk about under there, in fact nothing to talk about under there because there's no room for anything. You could probably fit, you might fit your lunch under there if you were just having cream crackers, but that'd be about it. There's the top of the linkage for the rear monoshock there, but nothing else to talk about at all. But I do want to show you this fantastic Ducati toolkit. Let me just show you this. This will impress you now here. Watch this. There you go. See, there's nothing left in the pouch. There it is. There's your toolkit. Look at that. That's fantastic, isn't it? I've got a bigger toolkit than that on my mountain bike, actually. What you're supposed to fix with that, I don't know. Perhaps you're not supposed to mess with this bike. Take it in and pay a fortune to have it serviced instead. So there we go. So that's the seat. Tank, that moves as well. You can unclip the tank there. There's got this clasp on it here. That unclips and the whole thing hinges up like that. And there's a little stay down here, which you clip on the edge there. And you can lift the tank up. The only reason you want to do that, of course, is to get access to the battery. Big airbox there, but there's the battery there. So that's nice, easy access to the battery. But really, not much else to talk about underneath there. I do want to talk about this, the dashboard. Let me show you this, because this is basic as well. I keep going about being basic bike, but it really is, and it's basic, but it's functional. We've got a speedo, there's no rev counter, nothing fancy, no fancy surrounds. It's black, we're getting the whole bike's black plastics around, and all your warning lamps there. But there is a slight, it's not a problem, but it's something that just caught me out on here. If I switch the ignition on, if you watch this here, if you're running with your lights on, which I do all the time, put my lights on, you get a green light showing you that you've got your lights on. Just above that is the neutral light, and if I just knock it into neutral, there you go, the neutral light's on. So you've got two green lights next to each other. So you're sat at traffic lights with it in gear, like that, and you think, these lights are never going to go to green, I think I'll let my clutch out. Am I in neutral? A quick glance down, you catch a green light out of the corner of your eye, you think, I'm in neutral. So you let the clutch out, and you go, and you stall it. Caught me out a couple of times. I know you'd get used to it very, very quickly, but it did actually catch me out. I don't mind owning up about twice. And that's not the only thing which could catch you out. The monster steers and changes direction incredibly fast. Just the slightest push on the bars and before you know it, you could easily be facing the opposite direction. It's not a problem. In fact, it's absolutely fantastic once you get the hang of it. What this machine lacks in performance, it certainly makes up for in manoeuvrability. And it's almost impossible to scare yourself on this bike. You'd need to get things completely wrong before the monster gets anything like out of shape. Because there's not really enough power to frighten you, there is a tendency to ride like a complete lunatic. And unlike the 900cc monster, there's no chance of the front wheel lifting under hard acceleration, and it's nigh on impossible to get the back wheel spinning out of a corner. You know, the one thing I can't work out about the Monster is which class it fits into. What type of bike it is, I'm not really sure. It's certainly not a sports bike. It's not a retro bike. I suppose it's what you would call a street bike, a naked street bike at that. The riding position also is a bit of a mixture of a few bikes, if you ask me. Seat is very, very low. You can get your feet flat on the ground, no problem, so short riders might like to try one of these. But the position of the foot pegs is, well, it's very sporty actually, because if, like me, you like to ride with the balls of your feet on the pegs, that's the way I tend to ride most of the time, certainly around the country lanes, it does push your feet backwards and quite high, and your legs are quite bent, even more so than they would be on some sports bikes. And that tends to tip you forward onto these bars, which are anything but sporty. Quite wide and fairly high, and you get a big wind blast on your chest there. Now down to my final moan, these things, the wing mirrors. Remember, right at the start I said more of them later? Well, here goes. Watch this. They tip you forward, the foot pegs. You lean forward, your arms are bent. Just look where my arms are now. Straight in line with the wing mirrors. Completely useless. You need to drop your arm like that if you want to see behind you. It really is a pain. And the front end of this has got all the aerodynamics of a London bus. So it isn't built for speed. So then why not make the wing mirrors just a little bit wider? They could go out 2 inches either side. You're not going to affect the handling, you're not going to affect the aerodynamics in any way. And at least you'll be able to see what was behind you. So that's it, all the moaning over with. You probably think I hate this thing now, don't you? Well, I don't, I quite like it, and the more I ride it, the more I like it. I think you really do need to get to know the bike. It handles fantastic, and if you got into a problem with this, then you really are doing something very, very wrong, because it's an easy bike to ride, quite forgiving. Handles great, as I say. Brembo calipers, front and back, so they're really good. Upside down forks, it's got everything. In the mechanical department, everything is spot on. There's just a few little things I'm not quite 100% happy with, especially this colour, this sort of matte satin black finish. I'm not sure that's my cup of tea. But the best thing, and the thing I like most about this, is the price. Because if you dare to be different and you fancy owning a Monster Dark, it'll cost you on the road just £4,200, and that's not bad.
And now it's time for us to meet our first motorcycle of the day on this rather chilly, incredibly bright morning. Now you've got to feel sorry for Ducati. There they were with an awesome performing modern classic in the shape of their 998, yet they knew eventually something would have to change. Change. There's something us human beings fear the most. So you just knew that when the object being changed was as close to our hearts and daydreaming minds as the old Ducati 998, that when the replacement came out there would be an almighty wailing and gnashing of teeth. And there was, because here it is, the replacement, the Ducati 999.
Let's get the formalities out of the way first. This bike ain't anywhere near as purdy as the 916, 996, 998 family, and nor is it likely to achieve their timeless majesty either. But who cares? We could argue semantics on styling all day long, but personally, I'd rather get on with riding the bikes rather than jawing about them.
Climb aboard the 999 and you know straight away that this is a completely different animal to its predecessor. It is longer, it is slightly lower, and it is altogether a damn sight more comfortable. Yes, the 998's famous torture rack riding position that both Ducati and osteopaths around the world have been making fortunes out of for years now is at last gone. This definitely is a Ducati you can actually spend time on away from the racetrack without needing a hot bath and a brace of masseurs to look after you upon your return.
But up the ante and you'll still find that despite the new and improved bonus comfort, you're still in just the right position on board for banzai track attack when necessary. The 999 retains the mind-bending mid-corner poise of its predecessors. No other production sports bike feels as safe at silly lean angles as one of these. Best thing about the 999's handling though is although the mid-corner abilities are still impeccable, where every incarnation of the predecessor from the 916 onwards needed a serious amount of body weight to actually get it turned in the first place, the 999 now flicks in with the lightest of nudges on the inside bar and then proceeds to happily hug the curb all the way to the spot-on apex of your choice. Precision and sweet steering. Whatever next. The gearbox is prone to the odd false neutral here and there when you're tramping on at the track. On the road it's not so much of a problem, but if you are on to thrashing your mates on a track day, make sure you use a firm left boot to avoid any embarrassing misgears. If we were poking around for another downside to this bike, it would be the question of noise. Or rather the lack of it. This bike is quite simply far too quiet for a great big red V-twin. To be honest, the sound is more of an apology than a boom that comes out of that exhaust.
Otherwise, the 999 is absolutely bang on. And as for the looks, Get over it, will ya? This bike outrides the one it replaces and it ain't going away, so get used to it. Now let's see how it stacks up overall. Performance, 10 out of 10. Quite simply, this bike is a stunning package of handling and power and braking. Styling, 7 out of 10. I like this bike more and more every time I see it. But that said, it's not going to be any great beauty like its predecessor. Comfort, 7 out of 10. Quite amazingly, the most comfortable Supersports Ducati ever. Not the torture rack that the old models were, very well improved. Reliability. We're going to sit on the fence here and go with a 5 out of 10 because the bike simply hasn't been out long enough to be proven yet. But the old models were getting better and better. If you do want one of these though, make sure you do spend money on proper servicing. Value for money, 7 out of 10, but only if you're loaded. 11.5 grand is a lot of money for a motorcycle. That said, if you can afford it, you get an awesome package.
Many people would say that the world's sexiest bike is a shiny red Ducati 916, but they're not particularly cheap. There is, however, a slightly cheaper alternative, a shiny red Ducati 748. 748 cc's of V-twin motor, delivering 97 brake horsepowers of grunt. The engine feels quite different from a 916. It's much more revvy, but it's still got tons of low-down power to shoot you out of a corner or catapult you away from a junction at an incredible rate. It doesn't look half bad either, does it? And you know, from just a few feet away, I reckon you'd be hard pushed to tell the difference between this and a 916. And that's because they share the same geometry, they've got the same suspension, and it is actually the same overall dimensions. Now up at the front here, a very neat, very compact dashboard, nothing fancy, with a green rev counter. I don't know why it's green, but well, I suppose it's different. Further back here, steering damper fitted as standard, quite useful, more use on a racetrack. Well, we're talking about racetracks. For people who like messing with the setup of the bike, here we've got the facility to actually alter the steering head angle. Very, very trick. And you may notice a lack of an ignition barrel there. That's where the key would normally go. But on a Ducati, it goes down there at the front of the tank, which is fine if you've only got one or maybe two keys on your key ring. But if you carry your bike key on a bunch of keys and you keep putting it in there and turning it, and this part of the tank really is going to get scratched to hell. And talking of scratching is what the 748 is all about. Ride it through busy traffic where you're stopping every few yards and you'll absolutely hate it. The seat is hard and the foot pegs are high. Bikes like this are not built for comfort. They're built to perform, to compete and to excite. The 748 does all of these things brilliantly. Head for the open road and you'll begin to understand what this bike is all about. Better still, head for the racetrack. That's the only place to fully appreciate the potential of this Italian thoroughbred. You'll find yourself entering corners at speeds which you've only ever dreamt about. So precise and sure-footed is the handling. You'll get massive adrenaline rushes as you twist the throttle and see the front wheel parting company with the tarmac. And if you should get your gear selection slightly wrong as you power out of a corner, the torquey nature of the V-twin allows you to get away with it. Well, it all sounds pretty impressive so far, doesn't it? Until you realise that all of this Italian style doesn't come particularly cheap. Okay, a 748 is cheaper than a 916 or a 996 as it is now. But a standard 748 like this one will still cost you about £9,700 for an official UK one. I believe you can get an import for about £8,200, so it's quite a saving there. But if you want the 748 SPS, that's the one with all the fancy suspension and the tricky bits and pieces on it, that'll cost you about another £2,500 on top of that. And when you think of its Japanese rivals, even the big twins like Honda's Firestorm, less than 7 grand, Suzuki's TL1000R, perhaps £7,000 and a bit on the road, it does start to look a little bit dear. Even second-hand examples like, say, an early 748 from about 1995 in a dealer's would still fetch the best part of £6,000. But let's look on the positive side. What do you get for your money? Well, you get this fantastic, sexy-looking piece of Italian exotica. Instantly recognisable. Single-sided swinging arm, very, very trendy these days. The much copied exhaust exiting under the tailpiece, and of course the unmistakable, gorgeous Ducati shape. It's well respected by everyone and it does its job superbly well. You've probably gathered that I personally love the 748. It's not designed for everyone. If you need a bike to take you to work and back, maybe carry a pillion or to cover long distances, then forget it. An all-rounder this bike definitely is not. It's not a particularly easy bike to ride well. It's perhaps not quite as forgiving in the handling department as some of the big four-cylinder sports bikes. It's challenging, it's involving, and once you get to grips with it, it's one of the most exciting bikes you could ever have the pleasure to ride.
A little guessing game for you. What's got a rakish belly pan like this? What's got an arrowhead-shaped headlight? What's got some very neat built-in personal protection? And what's got a tank with no name? You've guessed it, it's Ducati's latest, the 900 SS. Well, the first thing that strikes you is this voluptuous fairing that looks as though it's been carved from the solid. But it's not just pretty decorations. In here, it's got these air scoops, one either side, because this bike hasn't got a radiator. It's one of the air-cooled Ducatis, desmodromic, but no water cooling, so it needs these ducts to take air to the rear cylinder. And in fact, Ducati tell us this reduces the temperature of the rear cylinder by 20 degrees C. Well, as you can see, this engine looks familiar. In fact, it's basically the 900 SS engine that's been around since '91. Belt-driven overhead cam, 2 valves per cylinder. The big difference is it's got electronic fuel injection on this one. That means much better carburation, smoother torque, and you get another 5 brake horsepower as well, giving you 80 brake horsepower. Very usable horsepower at that. It might not be red, but once aboard, it's unmistakably Ducati. Sure, it's a bit more sophisticated than the old model, but that 90-degree V-twin, firm suspension, light agile handling is quintessentially Ducati. No matter how sophisticated they become, there's a certain edge to a Duke that you can almost taste. The 2-valve 904cc motor delivers its 80 brake horse in that lovely offbeat fashion that is the hallmark of V-twins. Nearly as smooth as a 4, but like Pavarotti, it does the business but without the screaming. Thanks to the new fuel injection, it'll pull smoothly from around 2,500 revs right through to 9 grand, where a rev limiter lets you know that enough is enough. Top speed is around 140, but playing tunes with the engine is what this is all about. Keep it spinning in third at 4,000 revs and then nail it, and the 900 SS catapults you forward. Keep hooking it up and knocking it back through the slick 6-speed gearbox and you can revel in the addictive mixture of exhaust rumble and mechanical whirring that is Ducati. While the handling of the old 900 was a bit of an acquired taste, this one makes you an expert from the start. The revised steering geometry, shorter wheelbase and a completely changed riding position means that the old slow steering and heaviness has gone, and also its tendency to stand up if braking when keeled over. Not that you should do, but let's face it, we all do it. Likewise, road holding has improved too, the beefed up showers doing their stuff up front, while the cantilevered rear end smoothed out the rest. At 188 kilos, it's easily stopped by 320mm Brembo discs and 916 calipers at the front and a single disc at the rear. The riding position is new too. Gone is the low seat, high pegs, narrow bars setup that left you contorted but not comfortable, to be replaced by an altogether more reasonable layout. Still sports bias, but this time with some comfort. Your knees tuck into the tank and the voluptuous fairing is not just curvy, it shields you from the worst and enables you to tuck down, just like Foggy. Well, sort of. The cockpit instruments come as a bit of a shock at first. The clocks are black. They work alright, but certain things I expect from Ducati. Red paint and white face clocks are 2 of them. But V-twin engines, stonking performance, beautiful looks, glorious sounds, lightweight and charisma are just a few of the others. And after all, they've used yellow before, so I make that about 9.5 out of 10. Not bad for a new Duke. Also not bad for a new Duke is the $8,350 on the road price tag. Who said Italian style is expensive? So just what is responsible for this improved handling? For a start off, you've got new 3-spoke wheels, which are much lighter than the old ones. You've got the shower forks beefed up, they're fully adjustable, and also they've got 43mm fork stanchions. They're massive affairs. The steering head angle, they've steepened that a little bit, just only by 1 degree, but it does give that quicker turn in. You've got the trellis frame, which has just been altered slightly. They've retained the cantilever rear end and the single shock, but they've improved the damping, they've improved the stroke of the shocker, and that gives a much more flexible, more compliant ride. So overall, lots of little tweaks to this Ducati, but I haven't finished yet. They've also got a very neat touch once you've undone the seat. The seat's very easy to remove. Neat lock at the back, just lift it up. There we are. Underneath you can store waterproofs. Nice little toolkit in there, and they even give you a little torch. How about that? And once the seat's off, that allows you to unhook the front of the tank here and simply hinge it up. It's even got a little stand on, just like a car bonnet. And there you've got access to your air filters, the engine management chip, the battery, and also the shock absorber. Brilliant.
In a market they pretty much created, Ducati have seen sales decline in their once all-conquering Monster 600. So, in the face of Japanese challengers, Ducati have redesigned the baby Monster and given it a bit of a facelift in the shape of this, the new 620 IE. With an extra 35cc, a new frame derived from the S4, upgraded suspension and better brakes, this bike's looking like a really tidy package and basically is a completely new model in the Monster range. The 620 is available in 2 forms, the standard version like this one, or the sportier S model. With the S you get better ground clearance, a bikini fairing and a smart alley swinger. But to be quite honest, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the standard version. Do you know, over the years Ducati have sold over 100,000 units of these around the world, and sales like that can only be compared to the Vespa scooter of the 50s. Bored out to 620cc, the engine is still an air-cooled 90-degree V-twin with single-cam desmodronic valves. Now, with a larger airbox and bigger diameter valves, this lump now pumps out a healthy 60 brake horsepower. Torque is up too. With the extra power, Ducati have upgraded the brakes with 320mm discs with Brembo calipers, good initial bite, but smooth with great feedback through the new, more responsive forks. Riding the bike, you can feel the differences between this and earlier versions. The familiar vibrations still make their way through both the bars and the foot pegs, but without being a pain. The exhaust noise is typical of an air-cooled V-twin, and the new exhaust growls with the gorgeous, unmistakably Ducati boom. And as with every Duke, throttle response is spot on, as well as an effortless clutch to sum up the ride. You know, the Monster absolutely adores all the twisty, windy roads, and especially this new one sticks to those corners. Ooh, takes them all so curvaceously and so very elegantly. I can't believe how much this new Monster has changed. She's a lot more tame than what she used to be.
The performance is lively, with the extra horses immediately apparent in comparison to older versions, with smoother power throughout the rev range, feeling the motor pick up at 6,000 revs. Spin it up to 9.5 through the much improved gearbox, and you'll be grinning like the proverbial Cheshire Cat.
I really like all the changes they've made. They're certainly all for the better, and the Ducati still looks as beautiful as it always has done. Oh, and one more thing. Thank goodness they've got rid of that spring-loaded side stand. Look at this, filtering through traffic, it's an absolute doddle. You know, these bikes are so easy to ride. My grandma could ride one. Oh, performance, well, let's give it 8 out of 10. This is a completely new bike, and at its heart a revitalised V-twin. Now this 620 engine, oh, it's just so much fun, and the thing is, it's just as easy for a novice, and you can have just as much fun if you're one of the foggies out there. Now as for the comfort factor, let's give it 7 out of 10. It's an interesting position riding the Monster. The bars are well spaced out, but they're not too high and they're not too low, so it's the kind of bike that you can do quite a lot of miles on. Great for commuting to work, great for zipping through town. Ooh, don't you just love it? Build quality at Ducati has come on in leaps and bounds over the last 5 years, and these bikes are no longer considered unreliable. The old air-cooled V-twin engine has benefited from many years of development and can rival any Japanese motor. So I reckon build quality, we'll give it 9 out of 10. Value for money? It's got to be 9 out of 10. A bike with looks, poise, heritage and passion running right the way through it. And it's got electronic fuel injection, all for £5 grand. I feel a little spoilt, really. Street cred, eh? What can I say? Well, it was around 8 years ago that Ducati paved the way for street bikes. And since then, all the other manufacturers have had a go, but almost none of them have come up with a design that is as beautiful as this monster. We can only give it 10 out of 10. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Monster, an imaginary beast, usually frightening, or so the dictionary says. Ducati say differently. They say leave nothing to the imagination. Stick a big V-twin engine in an open frame and create the Ducati Monster. Alright, this one doesn't look very frightening, but Ducatis are one of those bikes that you either love or hate. I happen to love them, so you beware. Now what have we actually got here? Down the front, you'll probably recognise these upside down forks. Straight lift off the 900 SS, same goes for the brakes. They're not floating discs, but nevertheless look very neat, 320mm Brembos. The frame is based on the 888 World Superbike Championship winning bike, while the engine is based on the 900 SS, 90-degree V-twin, as I'm sure you can see, desmodromic, producing 71 brake horse in this one. So, it's a parts bin special? No, not at all. It is special though. It's special in the way it rumbles into life. It's special in the way you sit on it. Brace yourself with the flattish bars and gun it. It gives you that special feeling too, that only a naked street bike can. A monster smile. It feels alive, a point and squirt bike that's very difficult to ride sensibly. Sitting in it, not on it, and able to feel its pulse every time you crack open the throttle, you feel totally in command. And that's because it's so slim. All you've got here, big headlamp and this small deflector screen, which is actually an optional extra, and then behind that you've just got some very basic instruments. I say basic, but that's not strictly true on this one, because this one's got the optional rev counter completing this little carbon fibre backing. On the rev counter you've got a little LED display around the top. If you start it up you can just see them going around there, all very pretty. The rest of them, these indicator lights, are pretty standard stuff. Oil pressure just come on there, you've got your indicators and all the rest of it. But this one's a bit odd here. This one's for the side stand. And if you recall from the ST4 test I did, Ducati stands fly back. You can probably hear that click. It can be a bit of a disaster. But that one there, that's to tell you it's left down, which really means your spring's broken. Now this spring isn't broken, but this side stand is about the only thing I don't like about Ducatis. But anyway, what else have we got? Standard looking swing arm here. Monoshot rear, buried up there. It's all part of this stripped down look. A couple of silencers, nice and low, oval ones, looks very neat. But that's about it. All this gels together to make a stunking fun bike. It'll pull well from around 2,000 revs right through to 9 grand. But playing tunes with the engine is what this is all about. Keep it spinning on the throttle and snap it through the gears, rolling it off to use that V-twin engine braking to the full. By its nature, it's not a high-speed blaster. You really do have to hang on at 70, but get in on some swerves and have some real fun. In a way, it's got a motocrosser feel to it. It's light for a 900 at 183 kilos, lighter than the Speed Triple or a Bandit, so it's chuckable and manoeuvrable. And something else, as you can see, it's got a very low seat height, which is very useful for those people of, shall we say, a shorter disposition. And of course, if you are of that disposition, it also helps with the engine being much lower down than normal, so it gives a low centre of gravity. But just coming back to the seat for a while, see this little cover over the back? There is a pillion seat under there. All you do is unlock the seat, unclip this, and you have got a little pillion perch. It is a bit of a perch, but nevertheless, it's there. If you're into making statements, this one shouts out loud. Look at me, listen to me, eh? I'm a big about the motorbike I am. But the monster's cappuccino, not just coffee, and that's the difference. This frothy cup of fun will cost you around 7.3 new or just 5.8 for this yellow, slightly used stunner. Sports tourer is an incredibly popular sector of the market, and you can get big ones like this, ZZR11s, you can get Honda's Blackbird, or you can get the Hayabusa. But then again, in the middle, you get things like Honda's VFR 800 and Triumph Sprint ST, both great bikes. Then you get a sports tourer, which is more sports than tourers, and that's where Ducati fit in with the ST4. Now, I was going to have the ST4S, the one with the 998 engine, but they've gone and sold it, would you believe? So let's see what this one does. But before that, what's the difference? About 80 cc's and a few trick suspension bits, that's all. In fact, the Sport Turismo ST4 is the middle one of a trio, starting with the 900 engine ST2. This one, however, takes the 916 4-valve Desmo motor to give it a bit more oomph. The engine's had a bit of black box tuning, different throttle bodies and a slightly heavier flywheel than the ordinary 916, and that makes it more tractable and smoother. And of course it's character that Ducatis are all about, and it starts with that engine sound. Now the prop stand's interlocked with the ignition, so it won't start with it down at all, even with the clutch in, but if we fire him up, now you hear that engine noise, you also hear a rattle down there, which some people can't stand. Can you hear that clutch? Chutter? Listen, but that's because it's a dry plate clutch. That's all part of the Ducati magic. On the road though is where it counts. At 215 kilos, it's 8 kilos heavier than a Triumph ST, 5 kilos up on a Aprilia's Futura, and just a tad heavier than a VFR. But with 107 brake horsepower and a lithe chassis, you wouldn't know it. The ride is firm but forgiving, and combined with fluid handling, this bike gives you the feeling that it would do well on the track. A sort of foggy in a suit. Talking of suits, I wasn't expecting it, but this has come with 3 suitcases. All right, they're not suitcases, they're side cases and a top box, but there's a hell of a lot of room in there. There's room for a suit and a couple of dresses if that takes your fancy. But I'll tell you something else they've got. These are actually quickly detachable. And just like that, as Tommy Cooper said. And look at it, doesn't it look fantastic? A completely different bike. Well, all right, perhaps not fantastic, but it does look completely different, doesn't it? It's lost a lot of that sort of weight, or the look of weight, so it's a trim sports bike now. Anyway, when we're talking about your looks, I first tested one of these, the ST2, back in 1997, and the looks haven't really changed since then, but I don't think they've dated. It still looks very classy to me. Nice smooth fairing there, nice rounded headlamp, comes back to a nicely sculpted tank. Down there, of course, is that big 8-valve Desmo lump with its World Superbike heritage, which also goes for the frame as well, because that frame is derived from the old 888 World Superbike racer. Up front, you can see from the fork tops here, forks are fully adjustable. You've got your preload, your rebound, and your compression damping down below. Also down there, you can see we've got Brembo calipers and 320mm discs, so you've got all the sort of trick bits there. Up here, very neat little cockpit here. Got a digital display bringing it bang up to date, and then you've got your speedo, your rev counter, and the old idiot lights. Looking at the bars there, nothing really special. You'll recognise the Ducati switchgear as normal. There is a little choke lever on this side. Looking at the screen blade here, me being taller, I could do with a slightly taller one, and luckily Ducati actually make one. £55 it'll cost you, just screws in there, replaces that one. The mirrors as well, they're pretty good on this one. At least you can actually see what's behind you. They vibrate a little bit, but the view's clear enough. And with a clear view ahead and that big comfy seat, it all makes for a really comfortable ride. Slightly pitched forward, the riding position is all the better for nudging 150 on your leisurely tour. In the twisty bits, the 6-speed gearbox is a perler. Crisp and light, it makes playing a pleasure. So what else has it got to make it a practical tourer? Well, if I just lift the seat a minute, one good thing that it's got in there, if you can see it, see that shape there, that's for a U-lock. U-lock goes in there, and I mean, you need that these days with bike theft being as it is. Pity someone's pinched the one out of here, isn't it? Under there goes a little tool roll, so that's all pretty neat in there. But something else it's got, and you've seen the bike standing on its stand, is a centre stand. And over this side, just to make it easier to lift it up on the stand, you've got a neat little fold-out lever to save you grabbing hold of that pillion rest. So how much for Ducati's Classy Tourer? It's going to cost you $8,250 on the road, complete with a 2-year unlimited mileage guarantee. As far as the panniers go, or the side cases if you want to call them that, they're going to cost you £415 for the pair, and the top box will cost you £235.
Confession time, folks. I don't like Ducatis. Cue gasps of astonishment from the biking world and an avalanche of hate mail from seasoned Ducati riders. But I've always found their big V-twins just too lumpy and intractable, and altogether a little too uncompromising for serious road use. So today's challenge: can this 900 monster convert me to the cause? There's no disputing the fact that Ducatis do have a legendary status in the biking world. For many they're the equivalent of a two-wheeled Ferrari, and when Ducati launched their first 900 Monster back in '93, it offered the kind of performance once reserved only for the likes of Mike Halewood, all in a radical street package. And this latest version belongs to a stable beloved of one Carl Fogarty. If you're looking for performance and exclusivity, the Big Duke offers everything you could possibly need in a motorcycle for under £7,000. And even I have to doff my cap at the engineering on show. This trellis frame is a work of art, and the lovely 904 V-twin engine, when it's on song, makes more poke than a very pokey thing indeed. And isn't this styling beautiful? Whether it's a practical bike or not, the Ducati really is a piece of sculpture that would grace any art gallery. And there's no arguing with the performance either. Open the taps and the Duke takes off like a scalded cat with a deep-throaty roar. The suspension is firm and taut, and the whole plot steers with precision. But despite the fuel injection, that low-speed lumpiness will keep you on your toes in heavy traffic. And for those like me who simply couldn't live with the riding position of a sports bike, the Monster represents a much more rideable option. Though I have to say that for my money, Ducati have still erred on the side of style over comfort, and the Monster feels cramped for anyone over the average height. Though it wouldn't suit me, I can understand the appeal of this bike. There's a certain purity of design that makes a Ducati so much more than just a motorcycle, and it's perhaps a little unfair to judge it by the standards of humdrum practicality. If you want one, you want one. Me, I'll stand aside and applaud your choice. So now, the score's on the doors. The bike has to score highly for performance simply because of its uncompromising approach to its task. This bike is built for mile after mile of thrilling speed with precision handling. And it delivers. 9 out of 10 for performance. Comfort is another story. If you're athletic enough to fit the Ducati's design brief, you'll love it. But you'd have to be a hardcore fan to claim it's a comfortable bike. 3 out of 10 for comfort. What you do get with each Big Duke is a free family-sized helping of street cred. 9 out of 10 for street cred. And is it reliable? Well, once upon a time, Italian bikes were a nightmare of poor finish and poor components. But those days are now long gone. With Ducati's excellent and dedicated dealer network and superb after-sales care, you can buy with confidence. High-performance road bikes must have a 4-cylinder engine, an alloy beam frame, and lots of flashy, brightly coloured graphics, right? Wrong. This is the Ducati ST4S, the bike that just rewrote the rulebook. The ST4S is the latest addition to Ducati's sports tourer range. Though if your idea of a sports tourer is more gold-winged than track bike, you could be in for a shock with this one. Ducati's approach to tourers is to take their stunning 996 sports bike, raise the handlebars and screen a couple of inches, widen the seat and stick a set of panniers in the accessory catalogue. This bike is definitely at the sports end of the spectrum, but concessions to rider comfort and practicality have resulted in a usable, thrilling and taut bike that actually makes a lot of sense on the road. The riding position gives a semi-racing crouch with quite a high seat that invites you to wrap yourself around this elegantly sculpted petrol tank. The handlebars are quite low down and set quite wide, and the footrests are quite well back, so you do get really tucked into this bike. The mirrors work really well too, being mounted low and wide enough to give a really good view of the world receding rapidly backwards. There's plenty of ground clearance, while the narrowish screen keeps most of the wind blast off the rider, just your head and shoulders left to the mercy of the elements. But the real heart and soul of this bike is that magnificent engine. Last year's ST4 used a legendary 916 motor, but based on the philosophy that more is, well, more, Ducati have gone the whole hog and bolted the 996 engine into the ST4S. And what a lump it is. The 996cc water-cooled V-twin, or L-twin, as Ducati insist in their sales brochures, uses fuel injection, 4-valve heads, 11:1 compression ratios, and the legendary desmodromic valve operation to pump out a meaty 117 brake horsepower and 72 foot-pounds of torque. And this is in a bike weighing in at only 204 kilograms. Power comes in strongly from 3000 RPM and continues to surge as the revs climb, propelling the bike forwards in an adrenaline rush of power that broadens your grin from ear to ear. The price you pay for this is a slight lumpiness at low speed, and the motor does sound clattery at tickover with some noise from the clutch. But low speed isn't what this bike is about. Get it out of town and onto the open road, and you can forgive it everything as it demolishes mile after mile with supreme confidence. That confidence is rooted in the bike's handling. Ducati's gorgeous trellis frame is a direct response to what the Italians see as the crude approach favoured by the Japanese with their alloy beam frames. The engine on this bike is mounted as a stressed member, and the whole plot gives big solid mountings for the twin-sided aluminium swinging arm at the rear and the 43mm upside down forks at the front. Ducati aren't shy of sourcing the best components. The forks are titanium nitrided Showas, and the rear suspension comes from Öhlins with preload and damping adjustable from the rider's seat. The brakes too are arguably the best on the market. The twin Brembo Goldline calipers and floating discs, capable of hauling the bike down from warp speed with a G-force sufficient to wrap you hard against a reassuringly sculpted fuel tank. Styling-wise, the bike is elegant but rather understated, the rather muted metallic grey finish in our test bike looking a little bland. Purchasers requiring something a little flashier may be tempted by the alternative bright red or yellow options. If you're looking for a thoroughbred high-performance all-rounder with real touring ability, take a good look at the Ducati ST4S. Loads of power, loads of torque, and that wonderful Ducati roar. Open the throttle and pretend you're Carl Fogarty. Only marred by low-speed lumpiness which can catch you out in the wrong gear around town. Quick steering, taut handling, and the best brakes in the business. For performance, 9 out of 10. The seat's a bit hard, and some may find these low handlebars induce risk takes in traffic, but hey, you weren't expecting the comfort of a Harley-Davidson electric glide with a bike like this, were you? This is a sports bike with touring capabilities, and it feels like one. I'm going to give it 6 out of 10 for comfort. Italian quality control hasn't always been the best in years gone by, but things are much improved these days. This bike is well put together, and the quality of finish is good. The mirror stems feel a little delicate, and I wouldn't expose the engine to too much winter salt, but keeping the bike clean is part of the bonding process that many owners will relish. Build quality, 7 out of 10. Listed at £8,650, you can currently pick an ST4 like this up for £8,500, and that puts it square against the Blackbird, the Triumph Sprint ST and the Hayabusa. You get a lot of bike for your money with the Ducati, and it's got a racetrack heritage, and you also get some of the best cycle parts in the world. This bike is less likely to depreciate quite as much as a Japanese bike would. I'm going to give it 8 out of 10 for value. This bike's a thoroughbred, a real rider's machine for the man or woman who takes their biking seriously and who wears wraparound shades while doing it. For street cred, I'm going to give it 8 out of 10.
10 years ago, we were treated to our first monster. Now here we have the latest version, it's the S4R. There's a bit of an age issue going on here. I mean, I know that the Ducati Monster is a classic of modern bike design, and Ducati, better than anyone else, are able to breathe life back into ageing designs by just tweaking them subtly year on year. But really, isn't it time we saw a new one of these? I have lost count of the different monsters that have come and gone over the last 10 years. 600s, 750s, 900s, 1000s, S models, S4s, dark ones, light ones, the list is seemingly endless. So what's this one then? Well, it's an S4R, which means you get a natty paint job, you get a single-sided swinging arm, you get twin upswept cans, and you get the motor from the 996. But it's nothing new, which means you'll still find a chassis in here that is okay, but it's a little too low at the back, it's a little too long for this bike to really cut it as a modern sports machine. Obviously, this isn't meant to be a pure sports bike, but against the rest of the pack here, it is the hardest to hustle. They've all got sporting pretensions, and this is the one that's now looking out of its depth. Then there are the usual monster traits to wind you up too, like the heavy throttle, the gearbox that doesn't like neutral much, and the abject lack of a pillion seat, plus a new monster trait to wind you up, which comes courtesy of those dual cans, which mean you can never quite get your right foot on the peg properly. The Monster S4R isn't a bad bike, but it's not a great one anymore either. And in a class as tough as this, it's now left well out of contention for the top honours. Styling, 8 out of 10. It's still an icon, but it's a bit old. Performance, 7 out of 10. Not bad, but not a patch on anything else here. Practicality, 5 out of 10. Bearable 1-up, no good in town, not much good 2-up, not looking brilliant. Value, 6 out of 10. It's still expensive, but you don't get anything very new.
First up, it's the Ducati ST4S. This is a sports tourer with the emphasis on sport, thanks to a storming 996cc engine that makes 117 brake horsepower with a claimed 160 miles an hour top end. The tank will give you a range of 180 miles. When Ducati initially decided to do a sports tourer, a lot of people doubted how good it would be, but were pleasantly surprised with the ST2 when it was launched in 1997. As the ST range developed, it's been proved that the Italians can do comfy, reliable bikes, and they don't crumble to pieces at the first sign of rain.
So basically we're looking for tourists today, as our punters, as we like to call them, are planning on putting a few miles under their belt. So, hi Martin, hi Catherine.
Hello friend, nice to meet you.
You too. I see you found the Ducati then?
We certainly have.
Right, so this is the ST4S. Very pretty, what do you think?
Well, it's red, it's Italian, it's gorgeous, what more can you want?
It is, they are really lovely, aren't they? Now, you are planning on doing quite a lot of touring, aren't you?
We are, later part of the year.
Now this is, I'm not giving too much away, but this is actually the sporty end of our range today. I think it might be a bit too sporty.
Well, I don't know, we'll have to see.
We are going to have to see, aren't we? I'm sure there'll be plenty of power there anyway. Catherine, what do you reckon to that seat? Do you think you could do some miles on that?
Yeah, I can, yeah.
Yeah, well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, so we need you to get your helmets on and let us know what you think.
Yep, thank you.
The ST4S has been restyled for 2004. Martin and Catherine are testing the 2003 model, priced at £8,800. When bought new, the ST4S will cost an extra £700 over the standard ST4. For that extra dosh, you get a fabulous suspension, which is incredibly stable. Buying second-hand means that the suspension will probably have been set up to suit the previous owner, so you might want to have a fiddle. The chassis is a corker, and you'll be able to sneak up on unsuspecting sports bike and then proceed to whoop them. The ST4S is a sports tourer with Italian style and panache, certainly not something to be sniffed at.
So Martin and Catherine are back with the ST4S. Martin, what did you think?
Well, it's very nice, it's very torquey,
Yeah.
very sporty, handles lovely. Whether it's the right thing for touring long distance on, another matter.
Yeah, do you think you could take it down to France as a thing? I mean, does it handle all right 2-up?
Well, it handles lovely 2-up, there's not a problem with it.
Yeah.
It's just storage and riding position for long distance, really.
Storage is a big problem, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it would be.
Yeah, because to put panniers or anything on this would really ruin the lines.
I definitely would. I mean, you don't want to put anything on it and ruin it, do you?
That's it. And now, what do you think of wind deflection and stuff like that there?
Fair bit of wind in your face.
Absolutely. So, Catherine, how are you on the back there?
Yeah, it's quite comfortable.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And what about the grab rails? When you came in, you looked a bit...
It's too small. I haven't got enough grip on the back.
Yeah, and if you
Seems
were
to
going down
slip.
to France, that's
Yeah.
a big issue for you, isn't
Yeah.
it? And also, where do you put your hairdryer? I mean, that's just the thing. So, brakes, all right for you?
Yeah, superb, very good. Bit wet today, but they still managed amply.
Yeah. And it's comfortable and everything, so yeah,
It is, yes.
just not quite that long distance.
Not for
tourer.
that kind of distance, no.
Yeah, as I suspected, really. Right, well, basically, before we actually decide on a bike, we want to give it some scores out of 10 in certain categories. So
Okay.
we need to know what you give the Ducati ST4S.
Okay.
Right, Martin, for style.
9 points. It's red, Italian, it's gorgeous.
Performance?
7 points. It goes very, very well.
Practicality?
5 points. Unfortunately, you can't put panniers on it.
No, it just wouldn't look right, would it? Reliability?
5 points. I've heard some rumours of reliability problems.
And value for money?
7 points. For day-to-day use, it would be a very good bike, but not for touring.